Hello, everybody. This is Sammy Pappert and my co-host Gary Conway. This is Renaissance Rap, Slow Talk Radio or slowtalkradio.com. Welcome back. And I'm delighted to be back from the heat wave of Texas. We'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, I want to mention in a few minutes we're going to introduce Don Murray. And if you don't remember that name, by the end of the show, you will be blown away by the accomplishments of our guest today. So we'll circle back to you shortly, Don. So, Gary, did you miss me last week?
I kept the seat warm for you.
Thank you very much.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
And by the way, I have to mention when we get to Don, I've known Don almost from day one. And if I would almost never use the word a legend because it sounds like he may be a little bit old.
He is old.
No. But I think Don's the first I met him, just a young dude, okay?
Yeah.
And we'll get into that. But
Yeah.
I know no one who has a greater body of work than Don, and we'll be exploring that today.
Cool. Well, I listened in from the show last week. You managed to muddle through without me. How's that possible?
It was really good. In fact, that's why I didn't have a chair here. You notice when you came in, you had to drag your own chair in. That's okay.
I'll stand if I have to keep you in control.
All right.
Well,
But go into last week. It's very important where you were, and we have
sure.
a little bit of that, and we're going to have a show based on that shortly. So,
right. Well, I called in from Texas because I was doing my other job, and that is helping newspapers generate more revenue so that we can save democracy.
saving the First Amendment.
It's, I think, a noble goal, saving democracy, but it is ongoing. It's relentless.
But you get paid for it?
I actually do get paid for saving democracy.
Wow.
So I was there with a fantastic new client in Austin, and there's nothing more important, I think.
No.
The threats we have if we don't have a freedom of speech and the First Amendment. I can't even go beyond explain them. There's so many.
Three of us here, and I know Don certainly would talk about that we grew up in our families, and every morning or every evening we had a newspaper. And as a matter of fact, till recently, we still got the New York Times delivered way the heck out on our ranch. And we thought a day is not a day unless you have that experience. But that, unfortunately, I think is gone. And what replaces now is the news on the internet. And where that's all going and the implications of that is something we must discuss.
Well, so the only thing I want to chime this will be repetitious from last week, but the newspapers, let's put quotes around the word papers, actually reach more readers today than they ever have. And there was a time when newspapers had 2 or 3 or 5 competing dailies in a major metropolitan area. And now newspapers literally between their printed editions, the good old-fashioned printed edition, whether it be a broadsheet or a tabloid, and their web versions and their mobile versions reach 85% of the total adults in the country.
The problem, and I'd like you to just comment for a moment, but we're going to get back into this in a later show. The problem is we're still in the land of the giants with the newspapers, because all the newspapers today have to have a giant supporting them. So it's not like us. We don't have to have any giants or anything. We don't have to have anybody saying, hey, you can have an article, you can say something. We can say anything we want right now.
Yeah. Well, again, we'll get into this, but the other point is on the internet, thanks to the internet, which is both good and bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be. The fragmentation of media sources is unbelievable. There are so many options for consumers today. And the newspapers, the traditional papers, had a tough time navigating to a bigger digital tomorrow.
But do you think there's a future, though, with the paper part of the newspaper?
So my personal opinion is that once the baby boomers are gone, the printed edition will be a very, very small niche product that newspapers are publishing.
Therefore, the printing press will not be around.
I won't go that far because niche products will continue. So there will continue to be printed.
Anyway, it's a very important subject. It has implications that go on forever. And ultimately, freedom of the press meant freedom of thought, freedom of being able to express yourself.
I look forward to continuing your education on this subject in the
look forward to it
very near future. But enough about where I was and what I was doing.
Enough about the First
Yeah,
Amendment.
it's a minor issue compared to our guest
Enough
today.
about the Constitution.
Yeah, for Pete's sake, man.
How boring.
Let's
Have you
talk
tried
about
to get
Don's
through that
sake.
damn Constitution. It's tough.
Okay, so since you apparently go back more than the 30 minutes that Don and I go back, I'm going to turn it over to you, Gary, to introduce our guest today.
Yes, and as I said, body of work you have to redefine when you have to talk about Don Murray. And I know Don, in fact, we'll get into that moment. We had an incredible mutual friend who is one of the great teachers of acting. I met him at Warner Brothers when I was on the contract. And Don will speak about Peyton Price in a little bit. And then we also have many mutual friends to this day. And maybe one of the major admirations of Don, we're going to get into that too, is I feel he started the independent film, the great independent film movement that flourished in the 60s, maybe through the 70s, maybe a little bit in the 80s, and I believe is gone today. We'll talk about that. Anyway, Don, I want to let Don really talk about Don, and that I've always been interested in. When I reviewed, I couldn't even actually review it correctly because when I listed all the films that you did, it's wallpaper. In fact, actually, I did put it up in part of my room. It looks great.
Well, so for our listeners and viewers, I did a count, and it's at least 60. It's got to be more than that, though, right, Don?
Yeah, I think it's around 80.
Yeah, wow. And that's full-length film. That's not counting TV and
Can you
Broadway
imagine
and shows like
let's think of that. 80 films. Yeah, film is not something you do. You phone in.
I'm not sure I've seen 80 movies.
You got to go to somewhere. They got to. I know, cast. You can spend weeks and months. That's a film, and to do 80 of them, done. Wait a minute. Are you still doing them? I mean,
Or I am. I'm doing
Yeah,
one right
see,
now, as a matter of fact.
don't you think you have to? Okay,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
So it never ends.
David Lynch's Twin Peaks. I'm in that. I have a running role in that.
Yeah, and that's
going on for
that's a must
several
see.
more weeks.
So let me just start a little bit at the beginning with the time we have here. Give us a sense of how this all began. It's always interesting how actors begin to act.
Yeah, good. Go, Don.
And give us that, Don.
Yeah, go, Don.
I know exactly where it began. It began when I was 4 years old, and it was Leroy's dancing school, and I was behind a big beach umbrella in my bathing suit, and I had a very, very pretty little 4-year-old girl sitting next to me. And when they rolled the beach umbrella away, we were seen kissing. And the audience laughed and applauded. And I think, gee whiz, you kiss a pretty girl, people laugh and applaud. Who would want to do anything else with their life?
But also your parents were also already in the so-called show.
My mom was a Ziegfeld girl, and my dad was a stage manager for Ziegfeld.
Wow.
And then he was also a dance director when I was born in Hollywood.
Did they encourage you in any way, or did they say, wait a minute, Don, maybe you should have a real occupation like a lawyer?
They didn't say that, but and they didn't push me to do it. They just let me make up my own mind.
Yeah.
But it was obvious that that's what I was going to do.
So
my brother didn't do it. My brother's an engineer and a teacher, and my sister's a teacher, so they didn't go into show business.
somehow it just cut
And I
you,
just went
right?
into
Cut
it.
you by the throat,
Yeah.
and you had to continue. So give us the beginning on Broadway, because I lost my way in all your credits, and we're going to get to Bus Stop, obviously, in a moment. But before Bus
Good.
Stop, what were you doing on Broadway? Just give us a quick
Well, my
synopsis.
Broadway debut, luckily, was a play by Tennessee Williams called The Rose Tattoo, and it won the Tony, as a matter of fact, as best play
So
for
you
the
get that to
season.
Broadway. I mean, you see what I'm talking about, body of work here?
Please,
That's one of the most important plays ever, and that's where he began on Broadway.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky to get that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very fine director named Danny Mann, and of course Tennessee Williams, who was one of our greatest
playwrights.
playwright artists.
He's fantastic.
And then you did a few more. We'll get to Bus Stop in a moment. What were maybe one or two of the other theater pieces?
Well, at that time, at the same time, early and before I got into movies, there was the play that got me into movies when I was in Skin of Our Teeth, which opened over in Paris as a part of a film festival, not a film, stage festival. And then we played in Chicago and then opened in New York. And Joshua Logan saw that, and he saw the energy of that character that I played in Skin of Our Teeth, and he saw that for Bus Stop, and that's why he hired me to play the cowboy.
And then Bus Stop became your first film, which was a monumental film. And you can talk about that in a moment, but I want to say, there's a difference. Because when you talk to Don, we get real serious. I mean, he's talking about serious works. And so when Don talks about it, we go, wow, isn't that something? So just contrast that. Like, for me, when I began, it was Teenage Frankenstein. See? And people laugh to this day.
To this day, exactly.
But we don't laugh when you say Bus Stop. We don't laugh when he gives all his credits. We sit there and go, wow, isn't that fantastic? And then I get to my second credit, How to Make a Monster. So what do you, Don's laughing.
When Bus Stop is
compassionate laughing.
When Bus Stop is your first full-length
Right.
film, it's hard to imagine getting much better than that.
And you can't kid with Bus Stop. You can't say, hey, what's a bus stop? Were you the bus stop? No, there's no kidding.
Well, I tell you, making a film with Marilyn Monroe opens a lot of doors for you for your whole career.
Well, tell us about that one scene where she was under something but not quite.
Yeah.
Because Sammy is that kind of guy. He's interested in that sort of.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going, Gary.
There's a scene where I come in, I wake her up in the morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, and she says, "Nah, and I didn't get to bed until 5," because she's a honky tonk singer, and so she works all night and sleeps during the day. And she was in bed, and I go and I try to get her attention.
Now this is on the set, and
this is
first thing in the morning, I'm sure.
Yeah,
right?
this is in the scene, and she figures that the character would be naked in bed, so Marilyn was naked in bed, and she was just under a sheet, and Josh Logan, after the first couple of takes, which they said they couldn't use, he said, Don, he said, she's just really feeling the character, and she feels the character would be naked, so she's naked herself. But she keeps on squirming around under the sheet, and she keeps on revealing herself. And so I don't want to lose the film to the editors on the cutting room floor. So whenever you see she's starting to reveal what she shouldn't, just reach in and tuck in the sheet. So I'm doing the scene with, in the meantime, I'm tucking the sheet, trying to keep her, from being exposed. And those days,
See, Sammy is so sorry to become an actor now, right?
Well, and today it wouldn't matter because today everybody's
naked.
Naked, yeah, but in those days it wasn't so.
Mention to us, obviously incredibly important for you, a debut first film, which has all, and then you got nominated for that film too.
Yeah.
But tell us in terms of, because everyone is still interested, amazingly, in Marilyn Monroe. I'm talking about an icon.
Oh, that's true.
In respect to her career, how did this film fit in?
Well, this was her comeback film. Marilyn, at the height of her fame, left movies, left Hollywood and went back to New York to study acting at the Actors Studio, if you can imagine. I mean, where have you ever heard of that?
No.
Of somebody, who was the biggest thing in their occupation, and they quit and go back to school for their occupation. It was quite remarkable. And this was her comeback movie, so it was getting a lot of attention.
And you mentioned, too, that there are two things I've always found interesting about Marilyn Monroe. One is that she was very intense about that, and she really respected that there was an art behind this. But the other thing is she couldn't remember any lines.
Yeah, she had...
Talk about that.
What I call it is a short attention span.
That reminds me of someone we have now.
Yeah, she had a difficulty with
Yeah,
lines.
and go on. So how did that work out? I mean, you were on Broadway. You could go on for 3 hours and remember lines.
Yeah, well, the problem with that is that you're in a scene with Marilyn Monroe, and she's having trouble with lines. Now, when she gets it right, you know that's the one they're going to print. So you have to be right every
All the
time.
You
Really
can't
have
be picking your nose during that take.
No, you can't, and you can't slide or rest on anything.
Right.
You have to give it your all
All
on
the
every
time.
single
You
take.
don't know which
All
one.
right, so let me interrupt just long enough to give us a station ID, folks. We've got to tell our listeners and viewers this is Slow Talk Radio or slowtalkradio.com. You're listening to Renaissance Rap. We'll be here every Thursday. My co-host Gary Conway and I are delighted to have Don Murray with us, so we can step right back up with the other show I want to ask about is the Advise and Consent. Since we're living in really interesting political times, and that was a very interesting political movie about a senator, right?
Yeah.
So with everyone, a name everyone knows is a director, Otto Preminger. So tell us about that a little bit.
Well, it was wonderful doing Advise and Consent because we shot it in Washington, where it all was really happening, and we had politicians constantly on the set visiting us. And then we had a private luncheon, just 6 of us at a private luncheon with Jack and Jackie Kennedy
Wow.
at the White House. And Jack sat through the entire lunch, and he was interested in show business. We were interested in politics. So we kept on bringing up politics, and he kept on bringing up show business.
He was probably asking about Bus Stop, wasn't he? He was asking.
I think he was interested in that. But then Jackie gave me a private tour of the White House, and that was interesting. Yeah.
Oh, that would be.
And one of the things that she did, everything, she had a lot of yellow in her and gold
Okay.
in the decoration, the curtains and napkins and things like that. And I said to her, I said, they never let you design for the theater. She said, why not? I said, because yellow is bad luck in the theater.
Oh.
And she said,
See, I didn't know that.
really? She said, do you think that yellow's bad luck in the theater? And I said, no, bad luck in the theater is a lousy review in the Times.
That is fun. By the way, a mutual friend of ours, Gene Seberg,
Oh, yeah.
had very renowned problems with Otto Preminger.
Yeah.
So you worked very well with him. He was very good with you. But that Gene Seberg, and we met Gene Seberg really after she had that long and very complex experience with Preminger.
Yeah, he has this funny thing. I understand some other directors have that. But it's the only time I've ever seen where he always picks a scapegoat, somebody that he can vent all his frustrations on. And it's usually someone who's not going to fight back. Well, there's always somebody who's not going to fight back. And he picked on Inge Swanson, who was...
Who?
Inge Swanson.
Ah, yes.
And she played my wife in it.
Mm-hmm.
And she was wonderful in the part. But for some reason, he kept on her and on her and on her until it really, really shook her up. It was a very unpleasant experience from her, even though her performance came out very good.
By the way, move ahead a little bit. Actually, well, it was on Bus Stop that Peyton Price had, you connected with him on that. Tell just a moment about Peyton Price, because he's had a huge effect on all our lives, our friends' lives.
Well, Peyton Price was an actor, director, and he was also a teacher at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where I went to school with Jason Robot and Don Rickles.
Isn't that funny?
Two great dramatic actors.
Right.
And anyway, he was probably also the best director I've ever worked with.
Absolutely.
He was
and a teacher beyond.
he directed me in a play, in a comedy called Room Service, that the people were laughing so hard we really had to just stop and wait for them. People were just getting in hysterics and couldn't stop laughing.
That happens on this show a lot.
Fortunately, we can't see the belly laughs of the audience. But I'm curious. I'm curious, Don. Best director. What does that mean?
Well, I think that when I see an actor start on his first day of rehearsal, and I see his final performance, and that growth, that happens because of the director.
Okay.
Either the director is making it happen or he's allowing it to happen. Whichever his method is, whether he's a kind of a guy that gives you a lot of direction, or whether he just makes a suggestion once in a while, he is still directing the show. And so your performance is part from the text, part from the author, and part from your own imagination, but greatly influenced by the director. And that's why I say he's a great director.
Don,
Thank you.
Let's jump to Hoodlum Priest, because I don't want to shortchange it for our limited time, because it was a significant film, obviously, in your life, and I believe it had, we'll talk about that in a moment, it had repercussions for later. So where were you in terms of your career then, and then why suddenly did you go in that direction?
Well, I was under contract to Fox Studios, and after Bus Stop, they tried to make me a cowboy actor. They had a couple of westerns, and one was really very, very good, From Hell to Texas.
Yes.
It was a story of a guy who was basically a pacifist, but he was also a great shot with a Winchester. And in trying to just save his own life, he's trying to flee these people, but they keep chasing him, and there's nothing he can do but shoot him. So a very thoughtful kind of piece, a very deep kind of Western. But I saw that they really, after the first few shows, like they bought Hatful of Rain for me, Broadway play, drama I played a dope addict, and they actually bought it for me to play the part of Polo, the brother who has the comedy, because of the comedy in Bus Stop. But I didn't want to do the same kind of thing. I didn't want to follow a comedy with a comedy. I wanted to do something opposite. Mm-hmm. So I insisted that I play the dope addict instead, and they, fortunately, director.
And that was a very important in film too. All of these are, by the way, everyone he's mentioned were landmark films.
They're probably the Hatful of Rain, because it's the first time they really dealt with dope addiction in depth in a movie.
So Hoodlum Priest then.
Well, Hoodlum Priest came about because the films that Fox was starting to get for me, I didn't feel they had much purpose. They didn't have much real depth to them. So I bought out of my contract. And I bought out of it because I had heard of this fellow named Charles Dismas Clark, who's called the Hoodlum Priest, because he worked with hoodlums trying to get them away from crime in St. Louis. But he did it so wholly, so completely, that he was thought of as being a criminal himself. That's why they called him the Hoodlum Priest.
But this decision that you did was significant, and we call ourselves the new land of the giants, and what you were in the land of the giant studios. And by doing Hoodlum Priest, you decided one day, I'm not living with them anymore. I'm going to go out and be the master of my own fate. And that's important in all art and literature and music, and here in film, especially in those times. We had, talk about control, giant control. The studios controlled everything. Yeah. You can do a thing without them. And suddenly you said, maybe I can. And so how did that play with you? Was that instinctive? Did you have to sleep on it, make a decision? Because it was a huge decision.
Well, it was, to me, it was obvious, and it wasn't even something that I questioned. Mm-hmm. I had this great title, just this drama in the title itself, The Hoodlum Priest. And I had these newspaper clippings about the real Hoodlum Priest, Father Charles Clark, St. Louis. I brought them to the head of United Artists, who they were really the big studio that got behind independent production was United Artists. Some of the greatest films were done for United Artists. And so I took the newspaper clippings to Max Youngstein, who was the head of United Artists. I said, look, this is a Hoodlum Priest, real guy, so on. He said, that's very interesting. He said, draw me something up. I made a 15-page outline, and he looked at it and he gave us some money to make a screenplay. And the first screenplay that we hired someone to do we couldn't use because it was a total cliche of a priest. It was nothing like this.
Yeah.
This guy talked like a hoodlum and was so much like a hoodlum that you could see why he would get into trouble that he did, when he was actually brought up on charges for being in cahoots with the hoodlums. And so it was an obvious thing that this is something that I might be able to get a studio behind. And Max Youngstein fortunately agreed with me and gave us some money. Not much money. Was our first budget was $285,000, and as a matter of fact, we ended up spending $500,000. And one of the heads of United Artists, not Max Youngstein, but another one, said, "You and your partner, a fellow named an advertising executive named Walter Wood, was my partner. They said, you guys are finished in show business. You'll never make another movie because you've gone over the budget by the biggest percentage in the history."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, how much over budget? What does it cost?" And they said, $500,000. I said, "Well, the movie we just did together, Bachelor Party, was $1 million. That's twice this." And that's 5 guys sitting around in the bar, and Oz got, chases through the, wars, street wars through the city, and it's a big production.
My sense of Hoodlum Priest, and I remember at the time when you're doing it, that's how far back we go, was that it was outside of what we understand the system. You're dealing a little bit around the corner, and the feeling I had was that it was definitely non-mainstream on its own.
No.
And right about that time, actually it wasn't that time, it was slightly later, that we got a guy named John Cassavetes, who you knew,
Yeah.
who began really to embrace the idea of the independent film. And I have an interesting memory of that because Cassavetes, I was in Burke's Law, did a lot of Burke's Laws.
Mhm.
And I couldn't imagine anyone, and I got to know him very well, who would be less equipped than going out there and doing a whole bunch of independent films. And the films he did, we're all aware of them. They were abstract,
Yeah.
but then, as we all know, between Hoodlum Priest and the Cassavetes, it launched in the 60s. And I made some notes, if I can find them, on the incredible amount of true independent films. They were done, a lot of them were done self-financed.
Yeah.
Like Billy Jack was a friend of mine who
Yeah.
did that, Tom Laughlin. And we had films like Easy Rider
Mm-hmm.
that was done outside the system. I even did a film at that time called The Farmer, which Columbia picked up on, but it all had to be done outside the system.
Yeah.
And if you look at those films today, there's something about them that even now I find compelling. I can watch Easy Rider anytime, for instance,
Mhm.
or I can watch 3 Easy Pieces.
Oh, yeah.
It's a phenomenal film and truly an independent film. It had no sense of a studio behind it.
Yeah,
They would have never done a
that's
film
true.
like that.
Yeah.
And then we went along with those, and I remember every friend I had, those are the films you went to see. What the studios were making at that time, you wouldn't bother. Then we got into the 80s. I'm going faster. And it all ended.
Yeah, there's a little bit going on today. For instance, the movie I'm doing now, Twin Peaks, with David Lynch. His is still independent movie making. Of course, it's on a much bigger scale. It's much more expensive than the little movies that we were making. But it still is independent, and he does what he wants. There's nobody standing over him and saying you have to do this or that. It is truly his vision is what
This
you
is
see
on
on the
television.
screen.
No.
Yeah, this is still.
And that's one of the things I think we've dealt with this a little bit. It's my feeling when that independent film, why they were so effective at that time and really impressive, it was on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw the 3 Easy Pieces, I saw it on a big screen.
Mm-hmm.
When I even saw, another one I was thinking, Eraserhead, you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, on a big screen. Then that is gone.
Yeah.
And so the independent, as you're mentioning today, I want to see most of us like this. And so is that really film anymore? What is that? And I think we have yet to come to the end of that story.
Yeah. That's the
end of our show.
Well, we're getting there. I'm looking at our chief engineer and all around ace. At some point, he's going to give me the high sign, but I don't want to cut Don short. It's been great having you here. I know we could probably do a 2-hour show, not a 30-minute show.
Yeah, this is like 20 seconds of his 60, 70-year career. It goes on forever and just is the tip of the iceberg.
Well, maybe we'll get him back.
Yeah,
maybe we can think about that. That would be fantastic. I do need to wrap things up, so let me remind our listeners and viewers, you're listening to Slow Talk Radio, slowtalkradio.com. This has been Gary Conway and Sammy Papert with our fantastic guest, Don Murray. It's been a treat to have him here, and we hope to see everyone out there next Thursday. So thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.